Welcome to our Manage for Performance series that we're starting here today. Is the first of a four-part series, turning managers into coaches. So I'm really excited about this today. We have a number of folks here on who are hosting a dynamic what is it? I'm not bilingual enough to say how many people we have in different languages, but I do know English really, really well, the proper English. I'm Jonathan Reynolds. I happen to be the CEO of how-tos Talent Strategies. I have with me as well Anthony Piccolo, who leads a fantastic organization called Performance Scoring. Edgar Jones as well on the team here. You're going to get to hear from him in a bit. He's a top-notch, world-class former athlete. I guess he's still an athlete, but more on the business side of the coaching house right now. We have Ben Murphy, who's vice president of how-tos Talent Strategies. You'll hear from him today. Got loads of wisdom on coaching as well. And then Mike Kinsey leads the talent optimization division of how-tos Talent Strategies. And so you are in good hands today. This is an interactive presentation. We will do our absolute best to get to every one of your questions that you have popping up. I'm sure the reason you're here is because we're all thinking, what the heck is going on in the talent space right now? Things are getting crazy. Not only are the gas prices getting crazy and the used car market and logistics getting crazy, everything's getting crazy. People are sitting in the driver's seat, and companies are getting scrappy. They want to hold on to their people. They want to engage their people, develop their people. So the whole thing today is around how to turn your managers into coaches, because people don't leave companies, they leave their managers. And it's a shifting day that we are in. People want to be coached. They want to be developed. They want to be engaged. They want to be retained. They want to know what's next. So if you want to get those top performing team members, you need to turn managers from prior generational understandings of management to the future of talent, which is high performance coaches. So that's what we're talking about today, which I am very, very thankful that each one of you are here. We've got a full house today. I'll give a little bit of background, kind of where all this came from. So I have the privilege of running a very fast-growing talent strategy company, where the majority of what we do is recruitment. But the other side is we started saying, how do we increase quality of hiring for companies? And what about the post-hire process? A lot of recruitment is all about day one, and that's not us. We tie everything into how do we engage, retain, and develop, and essentially get the most out of our people. I know full well that when we hire people for our organizations, it is because a job needs to get done. That's the point of hiring. And so defining what needs to get done is really, really important, but then also understanding the exchange that we have with our employees, which is, how do I engage you? How do I develop you? How do I show you that you really matter? So we've created this model, and that's what we're trying to really do here is to train and educate and equip companies all around the world with some philosophies and training that we have around performance management, engagement, and development. For me, as a business owner, I certainly don't want to be a micromanager, but I do want to know the future of our talent at how-tos. Do we have the right people in the right seats? Do they know what's expected of them in their job? And is there a clear exchange of relationship with their coach or manager? Do they both understand what's expected of either side? And we bring clarity around that with a tool that we now call Manage for Performance. So over to Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. Welcome, everybody. So what's really unique about this entire methodology is that it really does give you visibility into where your employees stand. But it's not just where they stand, but you need to know when to have critical conversations with people. And we want to be able to dive in and really show you this 4-box of how we break it down. You may have heard of 9-box and other tools before, but we wanted to simplify this because we find it to be a little bit more simplex in theory when we look at the engagement and the relationship that has on somebody's overall performance, and then performance itself. And that can also have an impact on engagement. So when we look at each one of these segments, and we're going to get into this in more detail, but just to give you a high view for now, as you look at the silent killers being very engaged people. They're usually ones that you would consider a cultural champion or an ambassador for your organization, and they're happy, they're engaged, but they're maybe not performing. And those can be really difficult employees to coach because they're very likable. And so you probably have an idea of some of those people within your organization right now. If you go to the lower left, you'd look at somebody who is not engaged and also not performing. And in that situation, that's probably a little bit more of an urgent need to coach that person up or out. You look to the right, the bottom right, which is the lone wolves category. And that is somebody who is not ultimately engaged or aligned with the business needs, but they're hitting their performance goals. I think the telltale is, people have probably experienced this before, but we've had salespeople that were hitting their goals, they were crushing their objectives, but ultimately they weren't ultra likable people and they weren't adhering to the values of our organization. And that can be really toxic for the culture and the environment. And that takes a whole different set of skills and coaching that we want you to feel equipped to be able to have. And then ultimately, the goal is to make sure that everybody at some point can be part of that committed champions group where they're engaged, they're aligned, they're hitting their performance goals and objectives. But as Jonathan said before, we've got Edgar here. He's been part of some amazing, even Super Bowl winning teams during his time in the NFL. The question would be, Edgar, is why do you think you still need to have critical conversations with a committed champion, somebody that's already in that quadrant?
That's a great question, Mike. Well, those committed champions are looking for ways to improve and get better as well. I think about my time playing in the NFL, being around some high engaged, high performing organizations. And even we were looking for ways to, sharpen our tools and add different tools in the toolbox. But we also were looking for ways to have that positive impact in the organization and also share our perspective as far as how we could become better as a whole and as a team. Now, as a leader, I think there's three things we need to focus on as we're having those critical conversations with those committed champions. The first one is just reinforce them how much you appreciate them and how much you notice the hard work that they're doing and the things that and the value that they bring to your organization, and being able to give them that positive reinforcement. And positive reinforcement is something that we all need. Number two is, for me as a leader, I need to find out how I can support them, how I can push them and challenge them, and how I can continue to become better. With those challenges, those committed champions need those, because if you don't give them those challenges, they can become disengaged, stagnant, and bored. So we want to be able to give those challenges to them, but not give them so much that they have so much on their table that they become overwhelmed. Number three is giving them that feedback. And I mean, getting their feedback. Their feedback is extremely, extremely important, and it's valuable because they can point out some things that I may not be able to see as a leader. They may be able to point out some things that I may not be able to see in the organization. And let's be honest, we all have blind spots. There's certain things I just cannot see. So being able to hear them speak and hear their opinion and what they're able to recognize, but also being able to hear creative ideas that they may have as well. And maybe they can share that with the team. To hit it home when you're dealing with these committed champions, you want to let them know how much they're valued, how much they're an asset, and how much you really appreciate everything that they bring to the organization. And that helps with engagement.
That's amazing. I agree. It's almost as if you look at the example of kids at home, and sometimes you give the most attention to the naughty kids instead of the good ones, and it's probably the wrong approach, if I'm understanding that right.
Yes, it's your own approach, and it's, I go back to the positive reinforcement. We all like to be patted on the back about what we do well, so it's extremely important.
Yeah, there was a question that came in too from Latoya of how often do you have these conversations with committed champions?
It just depends. It could be on a weekly basis. It could be on maybe a month-to-month basis, maybe a bi-weekly basis. But our application provides you with the tools for you to better assist you on when there is a good time to have that conversation with that committed champion. Those are the benefits of our application, our tool, and what it informs you when it is a good time to chat with them.
Yeah, I love that, Edgar. Thanks so much for that. I would agree that weekly conversations, at least as a touch point, can be so powerful. And at the very least, when it comes to maybe assessing performance, that's probably a bit more, like you say, a monthly or quarterly conversation that people can have. Good. The last piece on here before we move on to the silent killers is, how do you find the committed champions?
How much time do I got to talk?
A minute.
It always, to me, the committed champions, it always goes back to their values, making sure their values are aligned with your organizational values, seeing what motivates them. And to me, I always go back to work ethic as well. Those are things that sticks out. And also too, when I look at committed champions, I look at committed champions as individuals that's not about themselves, but they're about the team. They're about making people better on the team. So those are a couple of things that you can look at when it's time to identify those committed champions. But those values, the work ethic, and making sure those values are aligned with our organization. And also to them having the, how can we become better as a team and make the people around me better as a team.
Like I was going to just throw in on how you find those. There's two portions of like, how do you find them? If you're talking about how do you recruit and actually bring them to the organization, we won't have enough time to cover that in here. That is a part of some other webinar series, but we call it our holistic approach to recruiting and interviewing around the head, the heart, and the briefcase. And so we try to take that holistic view to really dial in and have a high hit rate on hiring committed champions from day one. But I'd also throw in that in the process of managing people effectively, and you take a holistic view of how you drive that person to be successful, part of what we believe in our M4P process actually, and Michael talked to you about it, it will show you who your true committed champions are all the time. And you're not flying blind in your people analysis.
Great. No, thanks so much for the insight, Ben, and for Edgar on that too. And we can go on over to Anthony to talk about silent killers. Anthony is a CEO. I'm sure you've seen plenty of silent killers in your day. So talk about critical conversations that need to happen with the silent killers.
Absolutely. Well, Edgar kind of touched a little bit on committed champions and some of the positives, right? These are people that are highly engaged. They really contribute to the organization, right? They probably buy into the missional values of the organization, contribute to a positive workplace culture. That's great. And in fact, it's so great, sometimes it causes us as leaders to sometimes miss the measurement against performance, the actual objectives, right? And that really brings us to, well, one, there's a finite cost for the individual missing their their objectives, for the team that they're on, for the division and the organization as a whole. And shameless plug, we have a great little tool, a little ROI calculator that you can go and look to see how much is it costing me to miss on some of these performance objectives. I'm sure there'll be a link in the chat, but again, those negatives is, the negative is you're missing performance. Now, we believe that we should meet people in the moment and really offer them a solution to career path themselves, to self-correct, right? Now, the first thing, right, is you got to have a plan. Well, to have a plan, you need good information. There was a question earlier about, well, how do we identify our committed champions? I think there's also a diagnosis tool we'll send out, and you can kind of, rate yourself or rate some peers, coworkers, or employees. But really having a tool that gives real-time information that contexts this historical performance data, how they're aligned to the organization and their skill sets is going to be critical to identifying any of these individuals in any quadrant that we have. Now, talking specifically about how we coach some of these silent killers, look, let's start with the positives, right? I'm a kind of a glass half full guy, and I really do think that if we can meet people to express the strengths that they're providing, right? Express the appreciation for the good things they bring in the organization, right? We want to ensure that the employee gets continual feedback on that performance, which Edgar touched on. We're touching on as we go through this, and we've got all kinds of tools for that, whether it's shout outs, feedback portals. your weekly check-ins, real-time coaching, right? Your quarterly conversations. There's all kinds of tools available, whether it's an M4P or some other process or methodology. But all of those require us to communicate clearly, right? And in doing so, we want to ensure that the employee understands where they're underperforming. They've bought into their history, right? That's another reason why you want to have a tool that tracks this stuff over time, right? So you're not really trying to create that shared historical narrative when you're sitting down to talk about performance. You want them to know where their performance is before you sit down and say, hey, your performance is missing the mark, right? And we want them to help us identify as leaders those areas where either they're unsupported, untrained, they don't have the right tools in their mind to achieve. Because what we need to do as leaders is identify, hey, is this the right person, wrong seat? Did I make a mistake? Right? Well, I need that data and I need that information, both the objective historical part of it, and then as well as the relational part in the moment with that employee. And I think really there's, we can talk about a million things, but communication is the key. Regular communication. We want high frequency, low stakes engagement. It's going to help in performance. It's going to help elevate these people that are silent killers. They're so positive in nature. They're contributing to a positive workplace. We want to actually put a microphone in front of them for that piece, right? We just need to grow performance. And so we'll provide, M4P or a lot of other tools out there can kind of provide a little bit of a peek into performance so those employees can see it. Now we want to be able to engage and provide feedback. And then of course, we can work on a performance plan, set meaningful goals for that employee, have that employee provide context for that. And then, but finally, but not least, we all need people around us that know this stuff. We maybe assigning a mentor. Edgar, I know he talks a lot about this, being in the upper echelon of sports, right? It's about having somebody that can come around you that's done it before, that's highly engaged and high performing. We want to learn from people that are already doing it. So as leaders, part of our job is to make sure we're assigning those people that are both high performing and highly engaged to try to coach these people. So with that, Mike, back to you, buddy.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. No, super good insight. I really appreciate it. And going right over to the lone wolf that we were alluding to before is they obviously perform, but they still have a negative impact on the company. Could they be performing even better if they were engaged, for example? So I would ask Ben Murphy, how should we navigate these conversations with lone wolves to start moving towards that increased engagement or alignment?
Yeah, so you have the performance, you're happy with what they're executing for you, but you got to drive the team dynamic or a value alignment scenario that's off right out within the business. And so a couple of key themes that we believe when you drive a people first culture, one of them is you have to create a culture where there's self and peer awareness. And so that lone wolf, for some reason, is either struggling with their own self-awareness of how they're aligning with the organization or aligning with the people around them. And sometimes it's due to just their behavioral tendencies are different than those other people. And so they're not able to apply their own self-awareness to what they need to do to modify the behavior to match up with their teammates. And so getting a little bit more in depth with them and coaching them on those emotional elements is something that can transform these people. Now, what happens is an organization doesn't always have either the training or the tools to bring some science to that emotional behavioral modification that's needed. And so that's something that we believe in wholeheartedly as predictive index experts. It's like, I need to understand myself. I need them to understand their teammates. And we need to get in depth because we got a performer here. Let's figure out how we get this thing to really work and move this thing forward. And that's how you get them up into that committed championship box. Now, if there's a values alignment issue that definitely can happen in a lone wolf, not everyone matches everyone's values or culture. And there's certain businesses that align accordingly. And so you want to hire well for that. You want to coach to that. And if there's a value alignment issue that's not correcting, it's not worth the performance. And so you have to make some hard decisions in there as well. But I think you can really have those peer and self-awareness talks to get these people into that top right quadrant.
Yeah, I'm looking at some of the chats, and Catherine brings up a good point, is now more than ever in the current climate, especially with so many more people working virtually. Have you seen those conversations have to change even more now that we're so much more remote?
Well, part of what I love about what we do with M4P is that we have created a conversation with each employee that's centered around the behavioral needs for them in their role and within the team, the value needs for them to execute a part of the culture, and their skill set development. And so we take a holistic approach to our conversations with our people that creates a natural sense of self-awareness and peer awareness. And so you have these awesome coaching conversations. We do them weekly or monthly at a lesser value. And then every quarter, we try to have a more in-depth coaching conversation with those employees. And so there's just so much growth that happens, and we're 100% remote. We do this in a 100% remote environment. We don't know anything else. And so the employees that I coach will come back to me and say, those well-rounded conversations are the best conversations I have all year long. And I think there's the pride of turning managers into coaches, because coaches, if they know what to talk about, you can train them on how to talk about it, and you can change the entire landscape of your employees' experience within your business and the growth and development of the people that are leading others within your organization.
Really good insight, Ben. Thank you for that. We'll pass it back over to Jonathan here quickly when we talk about the contaminators. With Jonathan, that it seems to be the most dire of situation. Is there anything that can be done when somebody is not aligned and not performing?
Yeah, it's one of those things. I think with all four of these quadrants, people can fall into them by sort of chance and kind of just flow through the organization, and they kind of like just they're right there because there is no definition, because people don't know exactly what is expected of me quantifiably in my job. Not do a great job, like that's what you're required to do. Like, no, define great. Define what that actually looks like. Give me some numbers that I'm going to, because most people's salary is a defined number, right? They go, here's what we're going to pay you. Now give me some clarity around what are you expecting me to do. So I think contaminators, there are people in your organizations, and you probably know them. Say, oh my gosh, that's Johnny. That's so and so. They're full into contaminator. And in fairness, we hired those people. So that's somebody hired them. It's not their fault necessarily that they're a contaminator. You hired them, but did you clearly outline what performance looks like in the job, quantifiably? Okay, so they could be in this area and they've just fallen into that category. And reality is, somebody on this call might be in the contaminator category. You're not getting your job done, but you don't even know you're not getting it done because no one told you what it was supposed to be. Okay, and in exactly the same way, when we talk about the performance, I would say defining the alignment piece around values, skills, values, behaviors that Ben just talked about. What are these things that are expected of me to get that job done? And the reality is, when we hire people, we all think they're going to be these committed champions. And I hope so. I hope we're not hiring people who think, yeah, they'll probably be a contaminator, but let's offer them a job anyway. We hire with an assumption they're going to do really well. But I think there are people in organizations who fall into any of these categories, but in this contaminator without knowing it. And I think here, what can be done, there's two things that can be done. You can fire them, get rid of them quickly, or you can get them up quickly into the committed champion category just by saying, here's what is expected of you, values and performance. And I think clarity is a beautiful thing. I think any relationships that you've ever been in that's broken down is because of a lack of clarity in your communication. What was expected? Somebody feels undervalued, disrespected, not important, because somebody didn't communicate it in their actions and behaviors, and then also a lack of verbally communicating what's expected. So, excuse me, but I think contaminators, like any of the other four quadrants, people can actually fall into them by some kind of chance, and all you need to do is put a system in place to show what's expected and then have regular communication with them. And if they don't change, it's costing you at least 100% of their salary, plus your time managing them, plus the wasted time of, on average, it's 7 hours a week is wasted as teams talk about dysfunctional communication and dysfunctional teams. That's a lot of time per year. And so bring clarity to it, manage up or manage out. It's the C word in the organization, like the contaminator word. Oh, it's the C word. Yeah, it needs to be zapped or cut out. Otherwise, it's going to actually, the word of contamination is very descriptive. It will affect others because those committed champions will not stick around when it is tolerated that contaminators there. But sometimes they just don't know they're a contaminator. So.
I completely agree with you, Jonathan. Thanks so much for that, and for everybody contributing here today. One of the big things at this point is you're probably wondering not only what quadrant are you in, and I'm assuming most people are in the committed champions quadrant at this point, but your coworkers or people that are reporting into you as well. And so take a minute if you'd like. There's a QR code here to be able to go to the diagnosis tool, answer a few questions, and just think of the employee that you have in mind and answer the questions honestly, and it'll actually come out with a diagnostic report for you. And we hope that it'll actually give you some information and equip you to have some more critical conversations with those employees. And so you can go to m4p.app/diagnosis as well. But would love for you to take the time and check that out if you're interested. Ben, I know we only have a couple minutes left, but maybe if you just want to briefly give us a cap here on critical conversations.
Absolutely. One of the things that most untrained managers or people aren't prepared to be a manager, they struggle with having these critical conversations. There's anxiety that goes into it. They're nervous about it. They don't want to hurt people's feelings, etc. And so it's really important that, in our belief, that you create a people-first culture where you let people know that you're about development and that you're trying to help them and that you will approach them about things, and it comes from the right context. And so if you truly believe in turning your managers into coaches, what do coaches and their players do? They try to win together. They're on a team that's trying to win together. So when your context is, hey, Johnny, I want to have a conversation with you. You and I, we've always tried to win together. That's what we're all about here at our organization. And I've noticed something that's popped up in your actions over the last 3 months that I thought was important for us to have a conversation about. I want to make sure I share it with you because I'm trying to develop you and make sure we're going to win together and we can make sure we get corrective actions as we move forward. So I've created a context that we're trying to win together. I've added some additional disclaimer to that comment about I'm trying to develop you and work with you. Disclaimer lines to start tough conversations are huge. It really softens and kind of sandwiches the way you want to have that communication. And then you can bring that corrective action or bring up that corrective action you're looking, and then finish that with a game plan of how we can make that happen together. Okay. And so as you're having critical conversations, and we have videos on these things and you can see these, but it ultimately will come down to context, disclaimer lines, how you're trying to win together with that employee. And then if you have taken the time, like learn a little bit more about M4P, but if you've baselined to Jonathan's point, what are our company values? What are the things that are important to us? Equips your managers, right? They have something to use as the level set. Our values are really important. And I want to talk to you about what happened here because that's not in alignment with the values that we have as an organization. It gives them a backbone to center all of their conversations around as they execute these critical conversations with people. 95% of these conversations, if you're having a good coaching culture, are super positive. 95% of them. But those 5%, you can't avoid them. It's not people first to not tell people where they're off. Make sure your coaches feel ready to go have those conversations and use some of these key tips that I have listed here and in the videos that we shared in this as well.
Thanks so much, Ben. I know we're at our time. So when it comes to questions, there's a lot that are coming through. And so just want everybody to know that we're going to follow up with each question personally, make sure that we get you the answers that you deserve. And we obviously love talking about this. We're happy to connect on it any time, but we're also going to send follow-up information and materials to everybody that has joined today. Just an offer for everybody. again, passionate about equipping managers and leaders and employees with tools that they need to succeed. And so we believe that businesses can thrive as well as people can love what they do, and they can do it with excellence. But to get there, it takes clarity and it takes intentionality, as we've talked about today. So M4P is definitely a tool that we believe in and that we would love to show you. If you'd like, we can certainly set up some time, talk about just walking you through the tool and exactly what it can offer, as well as our consulting around that as well. And so take a minute, scan the QR code. And we'd love to have a conversation with you and show you around a bit, get you some more information. And then lastly, this is part of, as we talked about on the top of the call, is a series of webinars. And the next one is on March 10th at 12 p.m. Central. Create a game plan with measurable performance objectives. This is, as Jonathan talked about before, one of the biggest swings and misses that companies and managers have when it comes to assessing their teams, but also just having a roadmap to coach teams. So hopefully you can join us. We really appreciate everybody who has joined and participated here today. Love the questions and feedback, and looking forward to having you join us next time. Have a good rest of the day. Thanks, everybody.